My daughter called at 2 a.m. Dad, please come get me. At exactly 2:03 a.m., my phone rang. I woke instantly. No one calls at that hour unless something has gone terribly wrong. The screen showed one name. Emily, my daughter. My hands trembled as I answered. Emily. For a second, there was only silence. Then I heard a shaky whisper. Dad. Her voice sounded weak, broken, almost like she had been crying for hours. Please. She struggled to breathe. Please come get me. I sat upright. What happened? Are you hurt? Another silence. I can't explain. A muffled voice echoed somewhere behind her. Emily gasped. They're coming. The line went dead. I called back immediately. No answer. Again. Straight to voicemail. A terrible feeling settled deep inside my chest. Something was horribly wrong. I threw on the first clothes I could find, grabbed my truck keys, and rushed outside. The 25-minute drive to her in-law's house became 15. Every red light felt like an enemy. Every second felt stolen from my daughter. As I drove through the empty streets, memories flooded my mind. Emily had always been fearless as a little girl. She climbed trees higher than any neighborhood boy. She insisted on learning to ride a bike without training wheels in one afternoon. Whenever she fell, she'd laugh, brush off the dirt, and try again. But tonight, the fear in her voice was unlike anything I'd ever heard. She wasn't asking for advice. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking me to solve a problem. She was begging for rescue. That terrified me more than anything. 3 years earlier, she had married Daniel. At first, I liked him. He had good manners, a stable job, an easy smile. He treated Emily like she was the center of his world. Or so I believed. His parents, however, something about them never felt right. His mother, Margaret, controlled every conversation. She decided where everyone sat, what everyone ate, who spoke, who stayed quiet. Even Daniel seemed afraid of disappointing her. His father rarely said more than a few words. He simply obeyed. I mentioned my concerns to Emily once. She smiled. She's just protective. Maybe. Or maybe I ignored what my instincts were trying to tell me. When I pulled into their driveway, every light inside the house was on. That alone made my heart race. I jumped out before the truck had completely stopped. The front door opened before I reached it. Margaret stepped outside. She folded her arms. Why are you here? I stared at her. My daughter called me. She's asleep. No. I moved closer. She asked me to come get her. Margaret's expression hardened. She isn't leaving. Those 4 words ignited something inside me. Move. You need to go home. I said move. She planted herself in the doorway. This is our family matter. No. I looked directly into her eyes. My daughter is my family. I tried stepping past her. She shoved my chest. You're not coming in. That was enough. I pushed the door open with all my strength. She stumbled backward, shouting for Daniel. I didn't stop. I ran through the hallway. Emily. No answer. I searched the living room. Empty. Kitchen. Empty. Then I heard it. A faint sound upstairs, like someone struggling to breathe. I sprinted toward it. Daniel suddenly appeared at the top of the stairs. You need to leave. His voice shook. Now. Where is she? She's fine. I grabbed his shirt. If she's fine. I shoved him aside. Then you won't mind if I see her. He lost his balance and fell against the wall. I reached the bedroom. The door was locked. My pulse pounded in my ears. Emily. Nothing. I hit the door once. Twice. On the 3rd strike, the frame cracked. The 4th sent it flying open. The room smelled stale. The curtains were closed. A bedside lamp cast a dim yellow light across the floor. Then I saw her. Emily lay unconscious beside the bed. Her wrists were bruised. Fresh cuts marked her forearms. One side of her face was swollen. A broken lamp lay nearby. For a moment, the entire world stopped. I dropped to my knees. Emily. Her breathing was shallow, barely noticeable. I checked for a pulse. Still there. Weak. Relief mixed instantly with rage. The kind of rage no father ever wants to feel. Behind me, Margaret's voice remained cold. She's dramatic. I slowly turned toward her. What did you just say? She fell. I looked back at my daughter. The injuries were too numerous. Too deliberate. Too impossible to explain away. This wasn't an accident. Someone had hurt my little girl. And before the sun rose, I promised myself one thing. Whoever was responsible would answer for every bruise, every tear, and every second of fear she had endured. The ambulance arrived within minutes, though it felt like an eternity. I never let go of Emily's hand. As the paramedics examined her, one of them looked at the bruises covering her wrists and quietly exchanged a glance with his partner. Neither of them said anything, but they didn't need to. Years of experience had already told them this wasn't an ordinary fall. "We're taking her to Mercy General," one paramedic said. "You can ride with us." I climbed into the ambulance while flashing red and blue lights illuminated the silent neighborhood. Behind us, I saw police cruisers pulling into the driveway. Margaret stood on the porch with her arms crossed, still wearing that cold expression. Daniel avoided looking at me. For the first time, I noticed something different. He wasn't angry. He looked terrified. At the hospital, doctors rushed Emily into the emergency room. The waiting area felt colder than any place I'd ever been. Every passing minute seemed to last an hour. Finally, a doctor approached. "Are you Emily Carter's father?" "Yes." He sighed before speaking. "She's stable." My knees nearly gave out. But that single word made my heart stop again. "She has multiple bruises in different stages of healing." Different stages. That meant the abuse hadn't happened once. It had been happening for weeks. Maybe months. There are injuries consistent with repeated restraint. I closed my eyes. The guilt hit harder than anything else. How had I missed it? She always smiled when we talked. She always told me everything was fine. Had she been protecting me? Or was she simply too afraid? A detective introduced herself. "I'm Detective Laura Bennett." She placed a small notebook on the table. "We need to ask a few questions." I told her about the phone call. Every word, every second, every detail. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she nodded. "We've already started collecting evidence from the house." "Was anyone arrested?" "Not yet." My fists tightened. "Why not?" "Because we only arrest people when the evidence supports it." I found my daughter unconscious. "I understand your anger," she replied calmly. "But if we're going to put them in prison, we have to build a case they can't escape." She was right. I hated it, but she was right. Hours later, Emily finally opened her eyes. "Dad." I leaned forward. "I'm here." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "I thought you wouldn't make it." I squeezed her hand gently. "You called me. I'll always come." She cried harder. For several minutes neither of us spoke. Finally she whispered, "I'm sorry." I stared at her. "Sorry. I didn't want you involved." I could barely believe what I was hearing. "You think you have something to apologize for?" They said. She stopped. "They said if I told anyone, I'd destroy everyone's lives." I felt sick. Victims often carry the shame that belonged to the people hurting them. "You listen to me." She looked into my eyes. "You did nothing wrong." "Nothing." The tears kept falling. Over the next hour, Emily slowly revealed the truth. It hadn't started with violence. It started with control. Margaret insisted Emily quit her job. Then she demanded access to Emily's bank account. Every purchase had to be approved. Every phone call was monitored. Visits to friends became disrespectful. Seeing me became unnecessary. Daniel always apologized afterward. He promised things would change. They never did. Then came the insults. Then the threats. Then the first shove. Then another. Eventually, fear became normal. Emily stopped recognizing the woman she'd become. The detective returned. "Emily, would you be willing to give an official statement?" Emily looked at me. I nodded. "Only if you're ready." She took a long breath. "I'm done protecting them." For the next 2 hours, she told the truth. Everything. Every insult. Every threat. Every bruise. Every night she cried herself to sleep. Every time Daniel looked away instead of helping. The detective filled page after page. When Emily finished, the room was silent. Then Detective Bennett quietly closed her notebook. "I believe you." Those 3 words made Emily cry again. The following afternoon, police executed a search warrant at the in-laws' house. Investigators photographed every room. They seized phones, laptops, handwritten notes, and security camera equipment. Then they found something unexpected. A hidden camera overlooking the upstairs hallway. Another facing the bedroom door. Someone inside that house had recorded almost everything. If the footage still existed, it could prove exactly what had happened. Detective Bennett called me that evening. We recovered the storage drives. I held my breath. "Our forensic team is reviewing them now." "What did you find?" She paused. "Mr. Carter." Her voice became serious. "This case is much bigger than we first believed." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "The videos suggest your daughter may not have been the only victim." The room suddenly felt smaller. "What are you saying?" "We've identified another young woman appearing repeatedly in older footage." "Who is she?" "We're working to identify her." A long silence followed. Then the detective added one sentence that changed everything. If we're right, your daughter's nightmare was only the beginning. The next morning, Detective Laura Bennett called before sunrise. Mr. Carter, we need you and Emily at the station. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the urgency behind it. Did you find something? We did. That's all I can say over the phone. Emily was still weak, but she insisted on coming. I'm done hiding, she said. I want to know the truth. An hour later, we sat inside the detective bureau. Laura placed a thick case file on the table. We recovered nearly 3 years of security footage from the house. 3 years. Margaret hadn't installed cameras for security. She had installed them for control. The videos showed every hallway, every staircase, every entrance. At first, the recordings appeared ordinary. Family dinners, conversations, people coming and going. Then everything changed. Laura pressed play on another clip. Daniel and Margaret stood in the kitchen. Emily wasn't home. Margaret looked directly at her son. She needs to learn who makes the rules. Daniel lowered his head. She'll leave if we keep pushing. She won't, Margaret replied coldly. She has nowhere else to go. My hands tightened into fists. Laura paused the video. There are dozens of conversations like this. Emily stared at the screen in disbelief. So, he knew. Nobody answered. Nobody needed to. Another recording appeared. This one was only 6 months old. Emily entered the hallway carrying groceries. Margaret deliberately knocked the bags from her hands. Glass shattered across the floor. Emily immediately apologized. I'll clean it. Instead of helping, Margaret slapped her. Hard. The camera captured everything. Emily burst into tears. I forgot that happened. Laura looked at her gently. Trauma often causes people to block painful memories. The room fell silent. Then came the most disturbing discovery. Laura opened another folder. We identified the woman seen in the older recordings. She slid a photograph across the table. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. She had married Daniel's older brother 8 years earlier. Emily stared at the picture. I've never seen her. You wouldn't have. Laura answered quietly. She disappeared from the family before your wedding. My heart sank. What happened to her? For years everyone believed the marriage simply ended. Laura paused. But after watching the recordings, we don't believe that's the full story. Police located Sarah living nearly 800 miles away under her maiden name. She agreed to return. When she entered the interview room, she looked nervous. The moment she saw Margaret's photograph, her face turned pale. She hasn't changed, Sarah whispered. Detective Bennett asked softly, can you tell us what happened? Sarah took a deep breath. She controlled everything. My money, my phone, my family, my life. She rolled up her sleeves. Faded scars covered her forearms. Emily gasped. They're just like mine. Sarah nodded slowly. She always said bruises heal faster than broken spirits. The room became completely silent. Sarah explained that Daniel's older brother eventually escaped with her. They disappeared without telling anyone because they feared Margaret would never let them leave peacefully. Months later, the marriage collapsed under years of emotional damage. Sarah changed her identity and never looked back. Until now, I always wondered if she'd find another victim. She looked toward Emily. I prayed she wouldn't. Meanwhile, police continued examining the digital evidence. One forensic analyst made an unexpected discovery. Several files had been deleted only hours before officers arrived. Someone inside the house had tried destroying evidence. Fortunately, the hard drive wasn't completely erased. Most of the recordings were recovered. Among them was one final video. The timestamp showed 1:42 a.m., less than 30 minutes before Emily called me. The footage showed Daniel entering the bedroom. Emily sat crying on the floor. I want to go home. Daniel knelt beside her. You know my mother won't allow that. She isn't my mother. She'll calm down tomorrow. Emily shook her head. She hit me. Daniel looked toward the hallway before whispering. I know. That single sentence changed the investigation. He had admitted knowing the abuse was happening. He had done nothing to stop it. Detective Bennett closed the laptop. Daniel may not have caused every injury. But legally, failing to protect someone from ongoing abuse can still carry serious consequences. I nodded. He made his choice. Emily quietly wiped away tears. I loved him. Laura looked at her with compassion. You loved the man you hoped he would become, not the one he chose to be. Those words stayed with all of us. That evening, arrest warrants were finally approved. Police arrested Margaret at her home. She remained defiant. This is all lies. Officers placed her in handcuffs anyway. Daniel surrendered without resistance. As cameras flashed outside the courthouse, he looked exhausted. Broken. For the first time, he realized his mother's control could no longer protect him. But the investigation wasn't over. During another search of the property, detectives uncovered a locked metal box hidden beneath loose floorboards in the basement. Inside were old journals, financial records, and several handwritten letters. One envelope had Emily's name written across the front. She had never seen it before. Neither had I. Detective Bennett carefully opened the envelope. After reading the first page, her expression changed completely. She looked up at us and said quietly, "This letter could change everything we thought we knew about this family." Detective Laura Bennett held the letter carefully, as though it might fall apart in her hands. The room was silent. She looked at Emily. "I think you should decide." Emily nodded nervously. "Read it." Laura unfolded the pages. The handwriting was neat but shaky. "Emily, if you're reading this, it means I finally found the courage to leave, or someone finally discovered the truth. My name is Sarah Mitchell. If Margaret is still controlling this family, then you're in danger." Emily's breathing became uneven. Laura continued, "She convinces everyone that she's protecting the family, but what she really wants is complete control. She isolates people, destroys their confidence, and makes them believe they deserve the pain. Please don't make the mistake I did. If you get the chance, run." Tears streamed down Emily's face. Sarah, sitting across the room, lowered her head. "I wrote that the night I escaped," she whispered. "I hid it where I hoped someone would eventually find it." The letter also mentioned something detectives hadn't known. Margaret kept detailed journals, not diaries, records, every argument, every punishment, every financial decision, every attempt to manipulate family members. Police immediately searched the basement again. Behind a false wall, they found 3 locked storage boxes. Inside were dozens of notebooks dating back nearly 15 years. Each one documented Margaret's obsession with controlling every aspect of the household. Detective Bennett looked stunned. "I've never seen anything like this." The journals contained dates, conversations, and even plans to isolate family members from friends and relatives. One entry chilled everyone. "If they have no one else, they'll never leave." Meanwhile, prosecutors continued building their case. Medical experts matched Emily's injuries with the timeline described in the journals. Phone records showed repeated attempts to prevent Emily from contacting her father. Bank statements revealed that money from Emily's personal account had been transferred without her full control. Every new piece of evidence strengthened the case. Margaret's confidence began to disappear. A week later, the courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the back rows. Family members sat quietly, unsure where to look. Emily was called as a witness. She walked to the stand with steady steps. Months earlier, she would have been too frightened to speak. Now, she faced the courtroom with quiet determination. The prosecutor asked gently, "Why did you call your father that night?" Emily paused. "Because I realized that if I didn't, I might never get another chance." The room fell silent. She described the insults, the control, the fear, and the injuries. She never exaggerated. She simply told the truth. Truth was enough. Then came Daniel's testimony. He entered looking exhausted. He avoided everyone's eyes. The prosecutor asked, "Did you know your wife was being abused?" Daniel closed his eyes. "Yes." "Did you stop it?" "No." "Why?" His voice cracked. "I spent my entire life believing my mother was always right." He looked toward Emily. "I was wrong." The apology came years too late. Emily listened without expression. Some wounds heal. Some only become easier to carry. Margaret took the stand in her own defense. She denied everything. She claimed everyone was lying. The journals were misunderstood. The videos lacked context. The injuries were accidents. But one by one, prosecutors presented the evidence. The security footage, the medical reports, the financial records, Sarah's testimony, Emily's testimony, the hidden journals. Each piece fit together like a puzzle. By the end of the trial, the truth was impossible to ignore. The jury returned after only a few hours. They found Margaret guilty on multiple charges related to abuse, coercive control, unlawful restraint, and financial exploitation. Daniel was also found guilty of offenses related to knowingly allowing and enabling the abuse. Neither looked surprised. When we stepped outside the courthouse, reporters rushed toward us. Microphones filled the air. Questions came from every direction. Emily simply smiled and said, "I don't want to be remembered as a victim. I want to be remembered as someone who survived." Those words appeared on television that night. Thousands of people reached out with messages of support. Many shared their own stories. Some said Emily's courage gave them the strength to ask for help. She had no idea how many lives she had already touched. Months later, Emily moved into a small apartment not far from my home. She started therapy. She returned to work. She slowly rebuilt the life that had been taken from her. Healing wasn't quick. Some days were still difficult. But each morning became a little brighter than the last. One Saturday afternoon, we planted flowers in her new garden. She laughed for the first time in what felt like forever. I realized then that justice wasn't only about convictions or courtrooms. Justice was hearing my daughter's laughter return. As the sun set, she looked at me and smiled. "Dad, thank you for answering the phone." I smiled back. There was never a world where I wouldn't. 3 months passed after the trial. For the first time in years, Emily woke up without fear. The small apartment she rented wasn't luxurious. The furniture was simple, the kitchen was tiny, and the bedroom overlooked a busy street instead of a quiet neighborhood. But every inch of that apartment belonged to her. No one checked her phone. No one questioned where she was going. No one demanded to see her bank account. Freedom felt strange at first. Some mornings she woke up expecting to hear Margaret pounding on the bedroom door. Instead, she heard birds outside the window. Her therapist called it survival mode. When you've lived with fear for so long, she explained, your mind doesn't immediately believe you're safe. Emily nodded. She understood exactly what that meant. I visited every Sunday, not because she needed me. Because we both enjoyed it. We cooked dinner together, watched old movies. Sometimes we talked for hours. Other times we simply sat quietly. Silence no longer felt uncomfortable. It felt peaceful. One evening she surprised me. "Dad, yes, I've been thinking about finishing my master's degree." I smiled. "You should." I thought my dreams were over. They were only delayed. She smiled for the first time that evening. Meanwhile, Detective Laura Bennett called with unexpected news. "We've recovered more financial records." What did they find? It appears Margaret controlled money belonging to several family members over the last decade. "How much?" Laura sighed. "Far more than we expected." The investigation expanded again. Former relatives, old neighbors, and even family friends came forward with similar stories. Each account sounded different, yet every one followed the same pattern. Isolation, control, fear, manipulation. For years, nobody realized they weren't alone. Now they did. Daniel remained in custody while awaiting the outcome of additional proceedings. One afternoon I received an unexpected letter. It was from him. I almost threw it away. Instead, curiosity won. Inside was a handwritten apology. He admitted he had spent his entire life obeying his mother because challenging her always led to punishment. He confessed that he knew Emily deserved better. He admitted that every time he stayed silent, he chose the easier path instead of the right one. The final paragraph stayed with me. "I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope Emily never blames herself for my failures." I folded the letter and placed it back into the envelope. Some apologies arrived too late to repair the damage. A few days later, Emily asked if she could read it. When she finished, she quietly placed it on the table. "I believe he's sorry." I nodded. "So do I, but being sorry doesn't erase what happened." "No, it doesn't." She looked out the window. "I forgive him for my own peace. But I can't trust him again." Those words reflected how much she had grown. Forgiveness was no longer surrender. It was freedom. Autumn arrived, bringing cool mornings and golden leaves. For the first time in years, Emily began making plans instead of simply trying to survive. She enrolled in evening classes to finish the master's degree she had abandoned after her marriage. Walking onto campus again filled her with both excitement and anxiety. She worried people would judge her for starting over in her 30s. They didn't. Many classmates admired her determination without even knowing her story. One professor often said, "It's never too late to rebuild your future." Emily smiled every time she heard those words. Life slowly found a rhythm. She worked during the day, attended classes in the evening, and visited me on weekends. Our Sunday dinners became a tradition. Sometimes we cooked together. Sometimes we ordered pizza and laughed over old family photographs. For years, fear had stolen those simple moments. Now we treasured every one of them. One afternoon, Detective Laura Bennett stopped by my house. "I wanted to give you an update." The investigation into Margaret's finances had uncovered years of fraud and manipulation. Several relatives discovered that money intended for family members had quietly disappeared. Important documents had been altered. Loans had been taken out without full knowledge or proper consent. One by one, former victims came forward. Each new statement strengthened the case. It wasn't just about one family, Laura said. It became a pattern. News of the trial spread across the state. Local organizations invited Emily to speak at community events about recognizing controlling behavior and seeking help early. At first she refused. I don't think I can stand in front of strangers. You don't have to, I told her. But if sharing your experience helps even one person, it might be worth considering. Weeks later, she accepted a small invitation at a community center. Only about 20 people attended. Emily's voice trembled during the first few minutes. Then she looked around the room. She saw people listening, not judging. She spoke honestly about fear, shame, and how isolation made asking for help feel impossible. When she finished, the audience stood and applauded. Afterward, a young woman approached with tears in her eyes. You helped me realize I'm not alone. Emily hugged her. That single conversation meant more to her than the applause. Winter arrived. Snow covered the sidewalks outside Emily's apartment. One evening she invited me over for dinner. When I walked in, I noticed something new hanging on the wall. It was a framed photograph of us from years earlier. She smiled when she saw me looking at it. I wanted a reminder of home. I laughed. You've always had one. She nodded. I know. A few weeks later, Emily graduated. As she crossed the stage to receive her degree, I couldn't stop smiling. Years earlier, I had carried her home from a place filled with fear. Now I watched her walk confidently toward a future she had built herself. When the ceremony ended, she hugged me tightly. You never gave up on me. There was never a reason to. Driving home that evening, I realized something important. Justice wasn't the day the jury returned its verdict. Justice wasn't the headlines or the courtroom. Justice was watching my daughter laugh without fear. Justice was seeing her make plans for next year instead of wondering how to survive tomorrow. Some scars would never disappear. But they no longer defined her. They reminded her how strong she had become. And as we looked toward the future, I knew one thing with certainty. The phone call that came at 2:03 a.m. had changed both our lives forever. It was the worst night of our lives. But it also became the night that led us back to hope. 1 year later, life looked completely different. Spring had returned, and with it came a sense of renewal that neither Emily nor I had believed possible. The memories of that terrible night had not disappeared, but they no longer controlled every waking moment. Healing wasn't about forgetting, it was about learning that the past didn't have to decide the future. Emily had accepted a management position at a nonprofit organization that helped families rebuild after crises. She often said she wasn't trying to erase what had happened, she was trying to make sure someone else felt less alone. Every morning she left her apartment with confidence instead of fear. Every evening she came home knowing the locks on her door protected her instead of trapping her. That simple difference meant everything. One Saturday afternoon, Emily invited me to a community event organized by her workplace. The room was filled with volunteers, counselors, and families who were beginning new chapters of their own lives. As Emily spoke to the audience, I barely recognized the frightened woman I had carried from that house a year earlier. She stood tall. Her voice was steady. She wasn't telling a story of defeat. She was telling a story of survival. People often ask me when life went back to normal, she said. The truth is, it didn't. I found something better. I built a new normal, one based on respect, peace, and freedom. The audience applauded. I quietly wiped a tear from my eye. After the event, a father approached me. My daughter is going through a difficult divorce, he said softly. Watching you stand by your daughter reminded me not to give up on mine. I shook his hand. Keep answering the phone, I said, even if she only calls to hear your voice. He nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. As the months passed, Emily slowly filled her apartment with reminders of the life she was creating. Books lined the shelves. Family photographs replaced empty walls. Fresh flowers sat on the kitchen table every weekend. The apartment no longer felt like a place to hide. It felt like home. One evening, Emily surprised me with a small wrapped box. Inside was a framed photograph taken on the day of her graduation. Below the picture was a simple engraved message. Thank you for coming when I needed you most. For several moments, I couldn't speak. Finally, I smiled. You never have to thank me for being your father. She hugged me. I know, but I wanted you to know what that night meant to me. Life continued moving forward. There were birthdays, holidays, family dinners, and quiet Sunday afternoons. The painful memories never completely disappeared, but they became smaller. With time, they were chapters of our lives. Not the whole story, Sometimes people asked me how I found the strength to force my way into that house. The truth was simple. I wasn't brave. I was a father. And when your child asks for help, you don't stop to calculate the risk. You go. You keep going until they're safe. Looking back, I realized the most important lesson wasn't about revenge or winning in court. Justice mattered. The convictions mattered. But what mattered most was that Emily reclaimed her future. No one could give her the lost months back. No one could erase the fear she had endured. Yet no one could take away her courage, either. She had chosen hope over despair. Strength over silence. Freedom over fear. On the second anniversary of that phone call, Emily and I drove to a quiet lake where we had spent countless weekends when she was a child. The water was calm. The evening sky reflected shades of gold and orange. We sat on the old wooden dock, watching the sun slowly disappear below the horizon. After several peaceful minutes, Emily smiled. You know, she said, for a long time I thought that phone call was the worst moment of my life. I looked at her. What do you think now? She took a deep breath. I think it was the moment my life started again. I smiled. So do I. We sat there until the stars appeared, grateful not because life had been easy, but because we had made it through together. Some families are tested by tragedy. Some are broken by it. Others discover that love, courage, and unwavering support can become the foundation for a stronger future. As we drove home that night, I glanced at my phone resting on the passenger seat. It was silent, and for the first time in years, silence no longer filled me with fear. It filled me with peace. Nearly 18 months had passed since the night that changed everything. Emily had settled into a life that once seemed impossible. She had earned a promotion at work, rented a larger apartment, and built a circle of friends who respected her for who she was, not for what she had survived. One Saturday morning, she invited me to breakfast at a small cafe near the park. As we sat by the window, she smiled and handed me an envelope. "What is this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was a letter with the logo of a local university. Emily laughed as she watched my confused expression. "I've been accepted into a leadership program. If I complete it, I'll be able to manage community outreach projects across the state." I looked at her with pride. "I always knew you could do anything." She shook her head. "No, Dad, you believed it before I did." Those words meant more than she could ever know. A few weeks later, Emily organized a neighborhood fundraiser for families rebuilding their lives after abuse and financial hardship. The event was simple, but hundreds of people attended. Local businesses donated food, volunteers gave their time, children laughed as they played games on the grass. Watching everyone come together reminded me that kindness could spread just as powerfully as fear. At the end of the event, Emily stepped onto a small stage. "I used to believe asking for help was a sign of weakness," she said. "Now I know it takes real courage. If you're struggling, don't wait for the perfect moment. Reach out to someone you trust. One phone call can change your life." The crowd applauded. I stood in the back, smiling quietly. No one there knew that I was the father who had answered that phone at 2:03 a.m. And I didn't need them to know. Seeing Emily standing there, confident and hopeful, was all the recognition I would ever need. As we walked to the parking lot after sunset, she slipped her arm through mine. "Ready to go home?" she asked. I smiled. Yes. For the first time in a long time, the word home didn't mean a place. It meant the people who stood by each other, even on the darkest nights. We drove away under a sky full of stars, leaving the past where it belonged and looking toward a future built on trust, courage, and unconditional love. The following spring brought another unexpected surprise. One afternoon, Emily stopped by my house carrying a thick photo album. "I've been working on something," she said with a smile. We sat together at the dining room table as she opened the first page. There were photographs from her childhood, birthday parties, school plays, camping trips, and family vacations. Then came pictures from the difficult years. Not to remember the pain, but to remember the journey. The final pages showed her graduation, her new apartment, community events, and the fundraiser she had organized. On the last page, she had written a single sentence. "My story didn't end the night I asked for help. That's where my new life began." I closed the album slowly. "I've never been more proud of you." Emily smiled. "For a long time, I thought surviving was enough. Now I want to live." A few months later, Emily received an award from a local community organization for her volunteer work. During the ceremony, the host asked her what had inspired her. She looked toward me in the audience. "My father taught me something that night," she said. He showed me that love isn't measured by words. It's measured by showing up when someone needs you most. For a moment, the room was completely silent. Then everyone stood and applauded. I wasn't comfortable with attention, but seeing Emily smile without fear made every difficult moment worthwhile. As we drove home after the ceremony, she looked out the window and said quietly, "If my phone had died that night, if you hadn't answered, everything could have been different." I shook my head, but it didn't. "You made the call," I answered, "and together, we found a way forward." She smiled. "I finally believe tomorrow can be better than yesterday." I looked at the road ahead. "So do I." The headlights stretched across the quiet highway as we drove into the night, not toward uncertainty, but toward a future we had earned together. Some scars remained, but they no longer represented fear. They represented survival. They represented courage. Most of all, they represented the unbreakable bond between a father and his daughter, a bond that no cruelty, no manipulation, and no darkness could. 2 years passed. The phone call at 2:03 a.m. had become a distant memory, but its impact remained with us forever. Emily no longer introduced herself as someone who had survived abuse. She introduced herself as a leader. Her work helping families had grown beyond the local community. She was invited to speak at conferences, schools, and community organizations. Every time she shared her story, someone in the audience found the courage to ask for help. One Friday afternoon, she called me. "Dad, are you free tomorrow?" "For you, always. I have something I want you to see." The next morning she picked me up and drove to the edge of town. We stopped in front of a newly renovated brick building. Above the entrance was a large sign. "The New Beginning Family Resource Center." Emily smiled. I accepted the position. "They've asked me to lead the center." I looked at the building, then back at my daughter. "This is incredible." She laughed. "Come inside." The walls were bright and welcoming. Children's artwork decorated the hallways. Volunteers greeted families with warm smiles. "This place is for people who think they've run out of hope," Emily said. "I want them to know they haven't." As we walked through the building, I realized how far she had come. The frightened young woman, who had whispered, "Dad, please come get me," was gone. In her place stood a confident woman helping others find the strength she had once searched for herself. Before we left, she handed me a small plaque. It read, "To the father who answered the phone, and never stopped showing up." I couldn't hold back my tears. Some people believe heroes wear uniforms or capes. I never believed that. Sometimes a hero is simply a parent who refuses to give up on their child. As we drove home, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. Emily looked out the window and smiled. "We made it, Dad." I smiled back. "Yes, we did." 3 years later, life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. One crisp autumn morning, I was watering the flowers outside my house when my phone rang. For a split second, my heart skipped. Even after all these years, a later unexpected phone call still reminded me of that terrible night. I answered. "Hi, Dad." It was Emily. Her voice was different now. Not frightened, not uncertain, confident. "I have some news." "What is it?" "I just signed the papers." "For what?" She laughed. "The Family Resource Center is opening a second location." I leaned against the porch railing, smiling. "That's wonderful. We'll be able to help twice as many families." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said quietly, "You know, none of this would exist if you hadn't answered your phone that night." I looked up at the clear blue sky. "No, sweetheart, you made the hardest decision. You chose to ask for help." A month later, the new center held its opening ceremony. Dozens of families attended. Community leaders thanked the volunteers who had made the project possible. Then Emily stepped to the podium. She looked across the crowd before beginning. "There was a time when I believed my story was over. I thought fear would define the rest of my life. But one act of courage changed everything." Sometimes courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's a quiet whisper that says, "Dad, please come get me." The room fell completely silent. Many people wiped away tears. Emily continued, "And sometimes courage is the person who answers." "I'm on my way." The audience rose to its feet. The applause seemed endless. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Emily and I locked the front doors of the center together. The building was quiet. Sunlight faded through the windows. She smiled. "I think Mom would have been proud." I nodded. "She would have been proud of the woman you've become." As we walked outside, I realized something I had never fully understood before. That terrible night hadn't destroyed our family. It had revealed its greatest strength. Love, loyalty, and the promise that no matter how dark life became, we would always find our way back to each other. We drove home in silence, not because there was nothing left to say, but because, at last, everything that truly mattered had already been said. 5 years passed. The emergency call at 2:03 a.m. had become a memory, but neither of us ever forgot it. Emily's Family Resource Center had grown into 3 locations, helping hundreds of families each year. The walls were covered with handwritten thank you notes from people whose lives had changed because someone had listened, believed them, and helped them find safety. One afternoon, Emily stopped by my house with a small wooden box. "I found this while cleaning," she said. Inside were old family photographs, birthday cards, and a tiny toy bicycle bell from when she was 6 years old. I laughed. "You refused to let me throw that away. You told me memories matter," she replied. We spent hours looking through the photographs. There were scraped knees, school graduations, camping trips, and birthday cakes with far too many candles. Then Emily looked at one picture of us standing beside her first bicycle. "You know what I remember most?" she asked. "What?" "No matter how many times I fell, you always stood nearby." I smiled. "That was my job." She shook her head. "No, that was your gift." A few weeks